All right, we still have another minute or so before we're all supposed to be back from our break, but thank you to those who may already be back. Apologies to those who just heard a voice start coming out of their computer. All right, I have 10:50. We'll give up, Alan, we'll give everyone another minute or so to just get back on. If you want to turn on your camera and wave, let us know you're here. Hi, Levi. Thank you. Hey, Rob. Hey, Aaron Jones. Hey, Tiff. There's Steph, Chris, great, Merritt, Steve. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know everyone's just coming back and getting resettled. And then while we are just giving everyone another minute or so, just a reminder, if you are a member of the public and you wish to address the RACs, that time period is at 1:30 to 2. There is a sign up through the note, which should ask if you want to collaborate. If you are having trouble getting into that note and you are a member of the public and you are hoping to speak at public comment, please feel free to send me a message in the chat and I can get you added. But I do want to remind everyone that the public comment sign up is available and we can get you added to that if you are having any struggles. All right, so Alan, 10:51. We might still have some people getting back from their break, but I would like to turn it over to Alan Bittner. He's our Deputy State Director for Resources, and he will pick up our next topic on virtual fencing.
All right, thanks, Kirby, and thanks, Donna, for advancing slides for me. I appreciate that. We'll just wait till we get that presentation up here momentarily. Here we go. Just 7 slides here today, but an important topic on new technology and ways we're leaning into it a little bit, this idea of virtual fence. And there may be some of you on the call in the ag community or with the state that know more about it than I do. But we're going to run through a few things here and maybe elicit a little bit of conversation. And certainly feel free to ask questions of me or throw something in the chat, and we'll continue a discussion here a little bit. Virtual fence for cattle and different grazers is really something that fits a certain niche or niche, if you will, that is not necessarily something that solves all problems. It's new technology. It's a great technology. There's a few different companies we'll talk about in a minute that are doing different things. It's quickly advancing. And we've got different people around the state that have been leaning into it, and it's great. There's definitely some benefits that we can realize, but keep in mind that it doesn't necessarily fix everything for everybody in every circumstance. It's not going to just take over all fencing all of a sudden, but there certainly are some clear benefits. I mean, for us, there's definitely some things you see we list there. There's more flexibility. Maybe we can put a boundary around a wildlife concern like a sage-grouse lek, and cattle, while they really don't impact leks a whole lot right now, you could identify some wildlife thing like that and put a boundary around it and decrease conflicts. I heard an example of avoiding recreation on the weekend, where a producer could move their cattle off of a more heavily recreated area during the weekend and when there's more people, and then allow the cattle to come back after that. So a lot of different ideas and flexibilities, protecting streams and stream banks, responding quickly to changes in utilization, or being able to better utilize the grass and forage that's out there. Different things like that are all possibilities and benefits that can help us. On the permittee side, just responding to the health of a herd or cattle. If something happens to a collar or it's not reading, you know to go out and look or see what's going on. And just tracking cattle better and knowing where they are, how to find them, and whether or not there's health concerns, and it can turn into saving the lives of some of these animals that are our livelihood. So, and it really comes down to, we talked about economics earlier, of course. It comes down to the economics for the producer and whether this works or not. I have another example of a permittee out of Silt that leaned into putting some money into this technology rather than building a fence at the top of their allotment. That was going to cost about $90,000 to rebuild it, but instead leaned into this technology and has a line drawn on a map and in the software now that helps out with that, and that fence did not need to get rebuilt. So a lot of benefits on both sides, but again, just keep in mind that it you got to look at it on a case by case basis right now, and it fits a certain certain parameters, and we're certainly interested in leaning into it, and I know the ag community is too. So next slide, please. Few different types out there. I listed some of them here. Of course, you could always Google these and look into these different companies. Some of you may be familiar with them already. Many of them operate with obviously the shock collars around the neck of cattle, but many of them operate off of a cellular network or rebroadcasting a cellular signal. By far, the one in the middle there, Vents, is the most popular one. Some people make it synonymous, Vents, with virtual fence, and we're trying not to do that. This is virtual fence. There's several technologies out there. No Fence is a Norwegian company that's operating, and Corral Technologies is another one out of Nebraska. So there's several technologies out there. Many of them are using, either cell signals or line of sight signals or rebroadcast signals that are needed. And there's a little bit of research going on too with satellite signals. So you wouldn't necessarily need base stations like the picture you see here, where there's batteries in this unit, there's a solar panel, there's a rebroadcasting of a signal from a high point in an allotment where that signal can then reach all the collars on the animals, and they would receive their instructions or their lines of where not to go. So the last one on here, University of Idaho project, they're testing some radio frequency things with smaller units on fence posts that might not be as big as the picture you see here. So that's a little bit of the research that's going on, but a quickly advancing technological arena with this virtual fence stuff. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight here a little bit. This actually is all of our offices, where we have something working in all of our offices, whether it's driven by us or driven by the permittee or driven by other partners. There are some things happening in many of them, some of them self-funded, some of them with partner support and help. Like I know we had some help with CPW on collars a year or two ago for a permittee. There's different tests and trials that are taking place. Again, you'll see Vents in here several times. Again, they've kind of been the leader, I think, in the United States and certainly in Colorado with that particular company and their technology of the base stations and the signals then and the software that can be used on a computer or your phone. But that's just one technology. You'll also see that there's a couple of others where people are and permittees are trying to look at other things. In the middle there, the Colorado River Valley Field Office permittees starting to look at halter or no fence, those companies as other options as well. So Um, so a lot of testing going on, trials going on, partnerships going on, both with the state, with us. I'll talk about our foundation in a minute too. But just a lot of things happening at the same time, but we are leaning into it really in every field office. The range cons there, the assistant field managers working with permittees, trying to see if it fits that niche, like I said earlier, if there is a scenario that works for permittees and a partnership with us to advance it. Next slide, please. A little bit more about partners. The point I want to make here is federal funding. There are several things in the work that came from the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And that goes to not just our agency, it could be NRCS or Forest Service. There have been several projects and partnerships in the works. Many of those things are just on pause right now as we've leaned into a new administration. We're optimistic that that some of that funding will come free and that we'll be able to continue to move forward and help support these efforts. And even if it doesn't come from those laws that came from a previous administration, we're still looking forward to advancing and finding funding to help out and continue to partner on this front. You can see at the bottom, some of the grazing boards have used the BLM 8100 monies to lean into virtual fence opportunities. I mentioned earlier Parks and Wildlife, supporting and buying or leasing some collars at one point. And I know Department of Ag, I've talked to them a few times about it as well. So just partners and opportunities are there. And as we find those situations that might work, we definitely want to continue to explore them from a Bureau standpoint. Next slide, please. So our BLM Foundation, the Foundation for America's Public Lands, one of the things they wanted to work on was virtual fence. And one of the projects they're doing in Colorado is to send some money to Eagle County. Now, again, this money, because of where it came from, is currently paused. But they did announce up to $1 million, and they awarded 300 to start to the Eagle County Conservation District. And in our conversations with that conservation district, they're willing to partner and work outside of that conservation district too. But right now we've had some success with a few permittees right there out of the Colorado River Valley Field Office. And we want to build on that success. We want to build on that success with partnership with the foundation so that they're actually looking to do some future fundraising off of the success of virtual fence. So we're optimistic that this will keep going and we'll be able to figure out a path here with the foundation. And it's an important partner. The foundation's only a few years old and only received its funding a couple of years ago. But we're definitely leaning into this project with them here in Colorado. And we're excited about that and looking forward to continuing that. And not only that, hopefully expanding that to other conservation districts or grazing boards or other opportunities as we find them with permittees around the state, as we build on the success that's taken place out of the Colorado River Valley Field Office. All right, next slide, please. So a few lessons learned. I mean, like I said, it fits a certain niche. So there are challenges. Sometimes line of sight can be challenging. Producers sometimes place towers near water holes so they can reconnect with the collars of cattle when they come to water. We also have internally to the Bureau, just looking at the guidance of how we place towers and making sure we're doing our due diligence on NEPA and with cultural laws. And so those things are things that we are still working through as we are presented with different opportunities. There are funding challenges. The economics, like I said earlier, have to work. They have to work for the producer. And so what are the service agreements with the companies? How often do you have to change the batteries or do maintenance or different things like that? software upgrades, a whole variety of things like that. So what do those things look like, and does it all pencil out on the economic front at the end of the day for a herd or for grazers on public land? Also, we have some more internal challenges there about just the way our grazing permits are handled and what happens when we convert an allotment to virtual fence. If we tear the fences out, where does the responsibility lie then? If decisions are changed, or if permittees change hand, or you want to change the type of cattle out there, things like that, we are still working through as a bureau, not just in Colorado, what that looks like for us on permits, and how we can be flexible with permits, and how we can still have accountability and responsibility in permits as it relates to fencing on the landscape. So obviously everything's built in with existing fencing parameters and barbed wire fencing, but if you move to a new technology like this and you are not maintaining fences, then how exactly does that look responsibility wise? So, and in turn with the next point there too, the hazards of old fences and whether or not they're removed from the landscape. So, and a couple other things there, just maintaining relationships between BLM and different landowners as fences are changed or maybe not existing anymore. And not of that, all of that is in our hands just because of the state fencing laws. But so anyway, guidance and things like that are important things, and we are willing to dive into these challenges and look at it because we do feel like there are some enormous opportunities here and some enormous efficiencies both for producers and for the Bureau. So next slide, please. And that's what we get into here with this last slide again, that it fits a certain niche. I mean, it's got to fit that right situation where it works out on those different parameters. And then if we can figure out the different hurdles in a particular case, we can find savings, and we can then look to some of the things I mentioned on the beginning. Maybe deal with fuels a little bit more, and by grazing in certain areas that for wildfire protection, or increasing the root structure, the soil health, the microbes in the soil, the plant diversity that you might get from being able to move cattle more. All of that comes with us, being able to be more flexible with the permits and work closer with the permittee. And hopefully then, you're increasing stocking rates. Hopefully the health and weight are getting better, and we're avoiding conflicts too with other users, like my recreation example I gave at the beginning, or the wildlife example I gave at the beginning. So lots of excitement here. I know that maybe some of you on the line know more than I do about it, like I said, but there is certainly opportunities here, and we are, as a Bureau, as a foundation, as I mentioned, and as we work with permittees one-on-one across the state, this is certainly an option, and we're certainly willing to explore whether it can work with somebody as you graze both on private and on public. So one other point I wanted to mention was, 3 RACs present here. I don't know if there might be some consideration for a resolution or something that a RAC might take up that explores the possibilities or the encouragement for us to continue to move forward on virtual fence. I mean, that's our intention right now. And like I said, there's a lot of challenges, but we are moving forward on them, and we are moving forward nationally too, trying to tackle those NEPA questions and those permitting questions as we get different examples in the door. So the idea of a resolution might be something that the different RACs would consider. And with that, I'd open it up to discussion, questions. We have plenty of time here, so we can dive into it a little bit deeper, or I'm sure everybody would love to go to an early lunch too. So thoughts, questions?
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, so Mike Campbell up here in Maybell, and we've actually utilized events for the last several years in a partnership with CPW, and it's been a really good program for us. It works really well, and I know it's not for everybody. And I've talked about these throughout the states. We're doing a study with CSU right now, and in one of the meetings that I was at last week or whatever, I had several producers come up and ask me. I think the biggest concern that I'm hearing about with these virtual callers and people getting involved in them is the data. I think a lot of these guys are really concerned about the data and what is used, where the data goes, and if it can be used against, a livestock producer or whatever. And we, as far as I know, through our events, Dan and I are the only ones that have control of that data. But it is a concern, if that data gets out and gets, somebody says, well, you're overgrazing or whatever, and tries to micromanage you. I think that's a concern. And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed on this is, the data and where it goes. So just my 2 thoughts on it.
Great point, and I appreciate that. And those are some of those questions that need to be resolved. I mean, I would think that the data of you working with that software and owning or controlling it on with your ranch, you would control it there. But obviously, we're trying to lean into making things better. I mean, some of the examples we have already is that if we can flex with a permit, the data that's coming out of things is that we are finding better soil health and better diversity of plants and better growth and vigor of plants and things like that. So I really think there's more of a positive to all of that, but I recognize the concern for sure, because if some area gets hit a little bit harder and fortunately the technology, I would think if you're seeing utilization too much somewhere, then you can more quickly adapt is the idea. So I mean, I'm looking at it from a pretty positive, optimistic viewpoint that we could move forward on things, and hopefully you're realizing some of those things too, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. We're, like I said, a good proponent for it, and the whole reason we did it is for soil health, and we've reaped multiple benefits from it. It's just that just seems to be a very common question that we need to kind of figure out, make these guys feel more comfortable as they get involved.
Great.
I've got Kent up.
Yeah, this is all very interesting. I'm just curious about a detail you mentioned fleetingly in passing, that it seemed to me you said that you can sometimes use satellites instead of towers on the ground. I could see how that would solve the line of sight problem, but I wonder about the coverage. The satellite comes over the horizon and then 5 or 10 minutes later it's gone and won't be back for hours. Or do you need a fleet of satellites? Or just can you say anything about how that option works?
Yeah, some of them have GPS technology in them and can utilize satellites. And usually there's a lot of satellites up in space right now. So whether you're listening to music or you're following your map trying to get somewhere, I mean, usually the glitches don't last too long because there's a constellation broad enough that that you can get signals without too much downtime. But obviously canyons, trees, different things can affect that when you're out on the landscape. But there are technologies that are utilizing GPS and can get some better coverage. And then so it's a trade-off. You don't have base stations. You don't have to worry about where you're placing those base stations and maintaining them, and the batteries and the solar panels and that side of the equation. So it's a trade-off of just like when we go to the field carrying a bulky satellite phone versus our normal cell tower phone, where we're connecting to hundreds of cell towers across the landscape. So it's just a different technology. I acknowledge your point that any of them could have a break in connectivity and have to reconnect. So whether it's line of sight, it's rebroadcast towers, based on cell phone towers, or it's satellite GPS technology that's broadcasting, or a combination of both. All of them have glitches and drawbacks and benefits too.
I see. The picture I'm getting is the satellite doesn't have to be smart about virtual fencing. You're using it as a communications relay kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
and
Yes.
the other question I had was, does the Vents brand in particular support the satellite option?
They're mainly base towers, I believe. Somebody else could speak to that probably on the phone, probably Mike.
Well,
Yeah,
We can go back to our slide on.
I can answer that for you, Kent. So it is a base station, but it's both satellite and cell phone.
Yeah.
So it utilizes satellites and cell phones both. It actually puts the map in the collar every time the base station touches base with the collar. It'll stick that map in the collar. So if she goes down in a hole, even though there's not coverage there, the map is still in her collar, and it'll let her know she's getting close to that fence. So it doesn't even have to touch the base station or the phone service once that map is in her collar.
okay. Well, that's pretty neat and pretty cool. Thank you.
I think next up we have Merritt and then Cal.
Yeah, thank you. This is and Mike answered some of my questions, and I get Merritt Linky, Grand County Commissioner. We're also I'm part of a fourth generation ranch family, and we do have a BLM allotment with this place, so I'm familiar with that part too. Anyway, a few years ago, well, I think in 2020, we had a local operator that did a pilot project with CSU. And it was a smaller outfit. And I think it's important to note that it doesn't work for everyone, doesn't work for all places. But it was an amazing success, I think, that this operator had, in that she was able to move those cows basically home when the threat of our big fire, the East Troublesome fire, came through, and get them out of the way of the fire just by with her phone. And it's amazing that way. And part of my question is, I kind of think that Mike answered it. And if there's, I guess there's satellite technology available, I get it. But I also know that cell service is pretty spotty in some of these remote areas. And some of it does need to be the direct line of sight things. Is there going to be issues with towers, or do we have to go through NEPA if we need to put a tower on BLM lands? And then I guess that would be my question. And there's certainly a lot of interest in it too, but there's some unanswered questions that some of our producers have here.
Sure. Yeah, and towers was one of the things that we're still working through, because there's not really clear guidance for us on that. But the towers that we have put up, we've tried to be light on the landscape. I mean, they don't take up. You can see the picture on your screen there. It's not taking up a whole lot. We got to make sure we don't affect cultural resources if we're ground disturbing at all, obviously. But trying to be light on the landscape with these things and limited impact. But at the same time, there are a few internal, even national challenges just with the clearance and the guidance. It's new technology. We haven't written a manual on how to place towers for virtual fence yet. So maybe we'll get to that. But it's just realizing some of those little challenges and working through them as we embrace a new technology.
Then one other thing, just to follow up, in that some of these BLM allotments in this country, and probably a lot of the other counties similar to us, is some of these BLM allotments have fences that are 80 or 100 years old, and they're not maintained. And as you all know, this was ground zero for beetle kill pine tree epidemic. So every year, a fencing fix project, it becomes a logging project, because you got to cut hundreds of trees off your fence that broke them down over the winter. And some of these, it's almost impossible to get to it with any equipment. So this virtual fence might really be a problem solver there, because there is issues with these old fences that aren't maintained, and cattle get tangled up in them, or horses get tangled up in them. So it is an issue there that this might help to solve. So hopefully we could work out some of these things. And again, I'm going to emphasize one more time that it's not for everybody. And a lot of the cattle that come in this country are what I call tourist cattle. They come in June, they leave in October, and they're yearlings. And generally speaking, I don't think it works on those because it does take a little training for the cattle to become accustomed to it. And generally speaking, Mike might correct me if I'm wrong, it works better on a cow calf year round kind of an animal that kind of knows her way around the country that they live in. So that's just a couple comments there. Thanks.
Mike,
So we use it strictly pretty much on yearlings anymore. We
Oh.
call our cows, we call her, 80 to 100 cows every year, but we call her about 550 head of yearlings, and they respond pretty much the same. Actually, it's the young ones pick it up really well, and so we haven't seen a whole lot of difference between the two.
That's good to know. Are these yearlings that are coming in, or are these yearlings that are home raised that are grown there, or is that?
Nope, they're just like you said. They're coming in, and we keep them for 120 days, and then we turn them loose, or sell them.
Well, that's good to know because I do that exact same thing here with some of the stuff that I do, and I might be willing to give it a try on some of these pastures that I have on some of this lease ground that is exactly what I was talking about, these logging operations on your fences.
Yeah, if you got questions, just give me a holler. You got my number.
I might do that. Thank you.
thanks,
Go
Spirit.
ahead, Callie.
Hi, thanks, guys. And yes, I have always been really excited about the potential that this has. I guess I want to go back to what Mike had said about the data. And Alan, I agree that it offers the opportunity and probably very successfully improving rotations and so forth. So it will improve grazing, the percentage of grazing in different locations. But I also want to remind you, you are, I'm assuming, supportive of grazing. Remember, we've got organizations out there that want all cattle off of the range. And so they will continue to use this kind of information, even though it's so good, it can be used against them. So I just want to remind and caution people about that because it will continue. Another thing, I really want to, again, caution, it's not for everybody. And I really want to be sure that BLM or Forest Service doesn't find a way to require it. And so again, if you've got a permit that's up for renewal and you've got an organization that is opposed to it and they want to force the issue and make them use the virtual fence, it may not work. And so I was wondering how you would manage that in the NEPA. And that may become a thing where it becomes one of the alternatives, but we have to somehow incorporate that in there, how it may or may not work for that producer, for that location. And so will it have to be involved in that NEPA document? The last thing I'll just say, Alan, I think you really should try to work on finding a way to help it with horses.
Thanks, Callie.
When you get that one fixed, work with wolves too. So just had to throw that out there. Sorry.
Yep. No, that we've laughed about that before, Callie. So I appreciate that point. But and your points are well taken about NEPA and how we lean into this technology. We are really looking at the benefits that are out there and how we can partner with people and we can realize some of those benefits. And yet we do have those challenges about how we deal with permits, and if fences are removed and things like that. And right now, I mean, no ideas in our mind of requiring virtual fence, but if you lean into it and you remove fences, then how are you viewing the future and how are you going to look at the future as that allotment moves forward? But right now we're just excited about the benefits that we can see on a case-by-case basis and trying this out. And we appreciate any and all partnerships to that extent from producers and from state agencies and other federal agencies that can help us try these things out and advance these things, because we're seeing real results on the ground that are beneficial. So, but
Yeah, and
your points
I'm
are well
excited
taken.
about it. I think there's lots of potential there. So thank you.
All right. We'll go to Kent, Victoria, and then Merritt. So Kent, go ahead.
Okay, I had a quick comment and then a question regarding the data issue, which seems serious. It's really a data privacy issue. And I can see where maybe if the government is holding the data, then under Freedom of Information Act, anybody might get it.
Right.
But if you had some private entity like, I don't know, Vents, for instance, maintain the database, then there could be a path to maintaining data privacy. But my question was, I don't remember your saying this, but I was very impressed on some of our field trips with how short the staffing is for monitoring racing. Would this is really a question to the BLM people, but is this a path to getting more monitoring with smaller staff? Can it be defended on that basis?
Well, I don't know really how to answer that question very clearly. I mean, we still need staff. Still need ground truthing. We still need monitoring out there. I think that certainly the technology could help us a bit, but you know, we don't want to not have people on the ground. I mean, it's key to have folks on the ground monitoring and helping in those regards. So, and we always could use more of that.
Well, I was not advocating smaller staffing by any means. I've been an advocate of more staffing, but I'm just wondering if it would make life easier for the small staff that you have. That was sort of the thrust.
Well, potentially, sure. Yeah, leaning into wherever we can find efficiencies. That's the name of the game for this agency.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Thank you, Kirby. I appreciate this presentation, and I find it fascinating that the software is advancing so quickly that this is something that is being tested and practiced in a variety of settings. I just have a couple of comments. One is that wonderful old line that good fences make good neighbors. And I would like to think that maybe there is a compromise with this, that virtual fence, like the example just given about how the rancher could move her cattle out of the fire area with just her cell phone. That's amazing to me. And I think that you know, certainly a static fence doesn't offer anything like that. But there are secondary impacts to consider that would be negative without any fences being maintained. I'm thinking of an allotment in Canyons of the Ancients in the Southwest District, the Flodine Yellow Jacket allotment, if I'm think I'm right, Derek and Ray and Stephanie, but please correct me if not. But there is a vacant allotment right now, and the fences have not been maintained. And unfortunately, there are trespass horses, not a wild horse herd, but a trespass situation with adjacent neighbors, some from, you know, the adjacent state of Utah and tribal nations, that without those fences, those horses are moving into an area that they had not been in before. So I think it's cool to consider how to use this technology, but also how to think about what it does not offer as well. So
Yes.
And I know that the RAC had a presentation last year maybe about the wild horse herds and yellow jacket and Flodine. Is that right, Ray and Derek?
So this is Ray O'Neill again, the monument manager at Canyons of the Ancients. And Victoria, you're right. We have a complex issue in the southwest corner of the monument in the area that abuts the Navajo Reservation and the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation. And we all agree that our ultimate goal is 0 horses on the monument and a way to move that forward. So we have that issue, but we also have the issue of cultural resources. And we've been following the virtual fence discussion closely. And when we get to a place of possibly issuing permits for those vacant grazing allotments, we're excited to see what we could do with this, while at the same time recognizing we need to have some fences, especially on the state line, to keep horses out.
Yeah, great points, Victoria, too. I'm well familiar with the whole issue there and the horse trespass and, boundary fences. I mean, we're like I said, we're leaning into where this works and there's mutual benefit and things like that. But there are certainly concerns like you raised for sure. Thank you.
Go ahead, Merritt.
Okay, thank you. Just a little bit of a follow-up. Again, Merritt Linke, Grant County, and a little bit following up with what Callie said and what Victoria just said too. And yes, virtual fencing, traditional static fences do serve a secondary purpose, and that is to mark property boundaries. And sometimes we do have issues not only with maybe an adjoining allotment or permittee or landowner. If I had virtual fencing on my lease or my allotment, but my neighbor didn't, and then pretty soon his cows are within my cows and potentially causing overgrazing. So that would be an issue. And then the other thing, what Callie said for sure that I would emphasize is I know there's a movement, and we hear it all the time, and that cattle should not be on public lands. But I will say that I have firsthand experience that livestock grazing is a fire mitigation management tool. And I have firsthand experience, and I can show any one of you a pasture that I had leased. It's about 500 acres directly in the path of the fire. And because those cattle removed the fuel known as grass, it didn't burn across that pasture. It tried. It burned up the entire west fence and had to be replaced. In fact, it got so hot that the wires lost their temper and they ended up replacing the entire thing. But it did not burn across that pasture, even though huge flame balls jumped out in there and had big 20-foot, 30-foot diameter circles where it burned. But fuel removal by livestock grazing is a very efficient fire management tool. So I don't think we should always forget that and mention that when we talk about that these cattle are causing all these problems on public lands. But in conjunction with all this, yes, it could be a management tool to make sure that the cattle are rotating and utilizing the entire allotment and not just hanging out at the favorite food spot or the salad bar. So those just some comments there, but those are some concerns for sure as we go forward with this that we would need to address at some point. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, one more thing.
Great.
One more thing. Sorry, and Kelly actually brought this up too. And this is sort of in jest, but maybe we could use this virtual fencing to keep certain apex predators away from our cows in reverse. Thanks.
Thanks, Merritt.
Yep.
Go ahead, Preston.
Yeah, the last comment was that was something I was just thinking about. Is there a use in here to keep predators away from cows and cows away from predators? Just a thought. Is there technology that could be used there?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't, obviously we're collared predators sometimes for tracking where they are with the state agencies, but not for the movement of them or moving them away. Certainly cattle can be moved for any number of reasons with this technology, but and that might be too for where predators show up, that you could move a herd away if you had the data or you knew a predator was approaching a certain area. I mean, there's possibilities there, I think. But this technology is really for livestock and for the movement of livestock. And there's benefits across the board, recreation, other things too. So I think we need to be open-minded about it working, but it also it's a case-by-case basis, and it fits a certain niche, like I said, and others have said, it's not for everyone. But good point. Others.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Kirby. This has been a great conversation. I think really helpful to kind of outline, all the potential benefits of this and the potential opportunities, and then kind of identify some of these concerns as well. And so just kind of to get back to what Alan mentioned earlier, I wonder if this is an opportunity kind of for the RAC to provide some guidance to BLM, as we push into this area, and think about how we can adopt more usage of virtual fence. I mean, again, I think I could see a resolution, expressing some support for these efforts and us using these technologies and facilitating the use of this technology. And then also maybe even identifying some of these watch out areas as well, right? I think I saw in the comment, with respect to the data issue, that has come up over and over, right? And I think the benefit that we have right now is that BLM doesn't touch this data, right? I mean, it really is us putting a base station on BLM land and facilitating producers' voluntary uptake of this technology, right? And so, I think we could, if the RAC is interested, we could think about coming up with some language that both kind of points us in the direction of thinking about how we can facilitate this technology for the benefit of producers and wildlife and kind of all the things we've outlined here. But at the same time, flagging some of those watch outs and making sure that we don't drift into a situation where we are, requiring the use of the technology or putting our hands on the data, so it could result in FOIA concerns. So happy to just put that out there. And if the RAC is interested, we could work on that.
Any other thoughts or comments from the RAC members? Go ahead, Justin.
I guess more of kind of a 10,000-foot comment on some of this stuff. We've heard about potential benefits for fire mitigation and potential benefits of the technology in general. I think it's always interesting to me looking at how the timber industry is kind of outlooks on the timber industry have kind of shifted a little bit in the last decade or decades. And they've kind of shifted from being a net detriment to the ecosystem to a significant benefit for wildfire resilience mitigation, and just more adherence to a productive fire regime on these landscapes. And I think when these kind of technologies and these different grazing approaches are explored, I think we're starting to recognize some of the potential benefits of some of our ag producers in that same capacity. And when we look at some of our neighboring states, I find it interesting that so many places across the country spend a lot of time and energy and money providing habitat resources for private landowners. And I've always really loved this conservation mechanism that we have put together in this part of the world, where we've got public lands that are sustaining contiguous native, the benefits of a contiguous native ecosystem, but also supporting those ag producers with surpluses on those landscapes. And I think that's huge. As we're exploring all these different things between the impacts of recreation or different user groups or multiple use in general, I think I just encourage everybody, especially on some of these folks that I haven't had an opportunity to engage with on some of these other RACs, to really keep those things in mind, that some of these producers have the potential to be a really, really valuable partner as we move forward on some of this stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Justin. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in that session. I think at this point we are a little bit ahead of schedule. I will offer Doug an opportunity here to make any pre-lunch comments, final thoughts about the morning sessions, but then we will go ahead and just break a little bit early, but still plan to come back at 1:30.
I'm hungry, Kirby. I think we can probably go.
Okay, that
Eat
sounds
our
great.
lunch without any further comments from me.
All right, so we will be back at 1:30. It's our public comment period. So I would ask RAC members and members of the public who are going to address the RAC, please try to be back on time. I'm going to leave the Zoom open. You're welcome to log off and rejoin us at 1:30 or just stay on. We'll keep it open. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, just real quick question from Lynn. Is there a limit per person on public comment?
Right now we're looking probably at a couple minutes a person.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll be back here at 1:30. You're welcome to stay on logged into Zoom or rejoin. But if you do plan to rejoin, just plan to rejoin a couple minutes early so we can get everyone logged back in. Otherwise, enjoy your lunch. Reach out if you have any questions or technical issues, and we'll see you back here soon.
So thank you. Just sending all that gratitude from the senator as well as our entire team. And with that, Senator Hickenlooper has spoken out many times against the illegal mass firings of federal workers, which were certainly indiscriminate and short-sighted. And he's also concerned about the impacts of the reduction in force, the potential implications that'll have on BLM's ability to carry out its mission. So, all of these decisions to significantly cut staffing could really undermine our access to our public lands and put us at higher risk of wildfires. So, just really wanted to hammer that point home that Senator Hickenlooper is advocating for the BLM and its employees during these really unprecedented and uncertain times. We do have resources for federal workers on our website, hickenlooper.senate.gov/federal workers. And then switching gears a little bit, I know, my colleague John Whitney from Senator Bennett's office is on. I'm sure you will talk about the Dolores NCA. Senator Hickenlooper is very much looking forward to continuing that work. So I'll let you cover that, John. And then Senator Hickenlooper is working on the Fix Our Forests Act. So I know that's been gaining a lot of chatter around the state. That bill aims to improve planning and expedite forest management activities on federal lands, really, aiming to help landscapes become more resilient to wildfire. So the senator has teamed up with a bipartisan group of colleagues to craft a Senate companion to the House version of that bill. So it can really address many of the issues that have been raised with the House version, and still achieving the original intent to speed up forest management projects. So our office has received outreach from stakeholders around Colorado, including input on ways to improve the language in a Senate version of the bill. And our boss has really made it a priority to develop a bill that can both improve wildfire resilience in the West, and then also protect some of our bedrock environmental laws, as well as securing the broad support necessary to pass it into law. So those are a couple of quick updates from me. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Patrick.
Thanks, Lisa. Good to see everybody. I'm Patrick Ortiz. I'm the San Luis Valley Regional Representative for Senator Hickenlooper. I'm based in Monte Vista, and I cover the 6 counties in the San Luis Valley, as well as Chaffee and Park. As many of you know, critical minerals are essential to our economy, infrastructure, and military capability. They are used in smartphones, EV batteries, and more. Currently, the U.S. is largely dependent on China for importing these minerals, which creates supply chain instability and threats to national security. As a member of the Senate ENR Committee, Senator Hickenlooper is working on several bills that will strengthen our supply chain and drive responsible production and processing with less environmental impact. Thank you to all the BLM staff. Please stay close in touch with our office. And thank you to all the RAC members across the state for taking up the responsibility to be in these advisory positions. It's important we keep showing up and speaking up for responsible management of our public lands and all its existing uses. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Lisa and Patrick. Turn it over to Mr. Whitney.
Thanks, Kirby. John Whitney here from Senator Michael Bennett's office. I am based in the Senator's Durango office. I am his senior advisor for public lands, tribal affairs, and West Slope regional director. And also Hillary Henry is here from our office as well, and she will jump in if needed here. But lots going on the public land front, so just wanted to give a couple quick updates. One, as Lisa mentioned, we are moving forward again on our Dolores River NCA bill in the 3 counties in the southern Dolores. Senator Bennett worked with the communities down there for well over a decade to put together a compromise bill that worked for a lot of different folks, the 3 counties, Montezuma, Dolores, and San Miguel, as well as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, grazing permittees, conservation NGOs, and others have all supported that bill for several years. We've been trying to get it passed, and we had hoped there would be an opportunity in the lame duck session this last Congress. There were some negotiations on a large public lands bill that could have included the Dolores, the CORE Act, as well as any other number of public land bills from out the West. Unfortunately, those discussions did not come to fruition. We were not able to get a public land package passed, so we will reintroduce the bill, joined by our longtime partner in the Senate, Senator Hickenlooper. We also are hopeful that Representative Jeff Hurd will be introducing a House companion next week as well. Now, the Southern Dolores is very different from the Northern Dolores. I'm sure people have heard a lot about the Northern Dolores. I think Senator Bennett will continue to work in the Northern Dolores to see if we can get to a similar compromise solution for a piece of legislation such as an NCA in the North. He certainly believes the Northern Dolores is a landscape that should have permanent protection, and we'll keep pursuing that as well. Big picture on public lands. Senator Bennett has a really deep concern right now what's happening with our public land agencies, BLM, not only BLM though, Forest Service, Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, that overall, do an outstanding job managing our public lands. And we may all have disagreements on how they do it from time to time, and that's of course what the RAC is about, is to provide some of that input. But the public lands are one of the finest things that our country's ever come up with. Some people have called it the best idea. And we're always going to disagree on how to manage those lands, and that's what the agencies are for, is to sort that out. And generally they do an incredible job. And, you know, Senator Bennett has asked us anytime we're speaking with BLM officials just to remind them how much he appreciates their work and to thank them for their work. It's sometimes not the easiest job, but it's an important job because our public lands really define who we are. So important to the economy, as we heard earlier. So the senator is very concerned about these many mass illegal firings that have been happening at the BLM and other public land agencies. We've lost a lot of really good people to those firings. It hasn't been done in a thoughtful way, this round of firings. Now, you know, I don't think Senator Bennett would disagree that there might be problems in the public land agencies on how they hire and fire people, and there might be a need for reform there, and there might be a way to come together to work on that to get to a better place, find the right and appropriate level of staffing. But this is not what's being done right now. What's being done right now has really been a hatchet coming in and just firing people unilaterally. Many people were fired just because they were on probationary status, but some of those are folks that were promoted to a new position because they'd done their job well, and so they got promoted and then they got fired. So we've been pushing back on this. We've joined with Senator Hickenlooper on letters pushing back on the administration. Senator Bennett took to the floor to give a speech on this issue. He pushed for a floor amendment to call for these fired folks to be brought back. We got some bipartisan support on that. He brought a fired Forest Service employee back to attend the State of the Union with him. He's held a webinar with Senator Hickenlooper for fired and active civil servants. And then most recently, he also brought back some folks from Colorado, including Gunnison County Commissioner Hauk from the West Slope to testify about what's happening and what the impact is on the ground from these firings. And, you know, both, you know, Commissioner Hauk and other witnesses really made clear that, you know, amongst all these firings, we've lost a lot of our red card people within the agencies that can work on fires and really make the fire fighting effort come together. You know, wildland firefighters were exempt, but many of the other people that help logistics on a fire were fired. So we think that's really short-sighted. The senator's very concerned about that. He's going to continue to push back on that. We really lost also some of the best people that help prevent fires in those firings, including, you know, people that work on the timber crews that actually mark trees to try and do forest restoration work to avoid fires. So unfortunately, you know, Senator Bennett was glad to see on March 14th, a federal judge did rule that these people have been fired illegally, and they are now being brought back. That's kind of trickling into the agencies. They're not all back at their desk yet, but hopefully more of them coming. The next phase in all this is what's called the RIFs, the reductions in force. You know, those are, you know, being circulated right now within the federal agencies, and every agency will be different, but each agency is looking at plans from cutting anywhere from 15 to 60% of their staff, and that would really, you know, cut deep, especially if you get to 40, 50%. We might not recognize some of these public land agencies that we're so dependent on and need for fighting fires and all the other important things they do. So we'll monitor that process closely and fight back on anything that is inappropriate. The other final topic I wanted to mention today that kind of hit the press today in DC on public lands is a discussion that's been kind of out there and rumors and concerns for months, but, you know, kind of went public today with a headline in the DC trade press from Politico, E&E. The headline says, Republicans weigh sales of public land and reconciliation. And so what's happening here is the budget reconciliation process is going on in Congress right now. And there's been a couple votes on that already, and there's going to be many more ahead. And that process is a very expensive process when you start moving around all the federal funding. And apparently what is being talked about is the consideration of selling public lands to help pay for this big bill. That's something that, you know, Senator Bennett is very concerned about. There's also bipartisan pushback. You know, the article today mentioned that Senator Daines of Montana and Representative Ryan Zinke from Montana are also very concerned about this. Senator Bennett sent out a tweet this morning to, you know, sound the alarm on this and say that he will fight to keep public lands public here in Colorado. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. And one of the things that's a real wild card on that is, you know, Senator Lee from the great state of Utah west of us is the chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee. That committee will have a lot to do with writing the final details of this budget reconciliation bill on areas that are under their jurisdiction, including public lands. You know, Mike Lee does not really believe in public lands. He's led efforts in the past for calling for selling or disposing most of our nation's public lands. That's not something that's popular. Polls show that is not where the people are, particularly in Colorado. Colorado, Montana are the states that consistently show as having the strongest support for public lands in the Western United States. So we're going to monitor this one closely. There will be a lot of floor votes on this, most likely. Whenever this hits the floor, there's likely to be a round of amendment votes on this bill in the near future, either this week or next. And I think it's safe to say Senator Bennett, Senator Hickenlooper, a lot of other Western Dems are coming together to figure out how to have an effective strategy to push back on this effort to fund tax cuts by selling off our public lands. So with that, I'll wrap up my comments. Thanks for the opportunity. Always good to be here and hear what's going on with the RACs, and grateful for the time.
Great, thank you. Hillary, did you have anything else for Senator Bennett?
Nothing on my end. John Whitney covered it all, and just really appreciate the opportunity to be here and thank our BLM employees for all of their service and hard work.
Great, thank you. All right, I will put forward a last call to any members of the public who are interested in addressing the RAC. Okay, Doug, where are you on my screen?
I am here.
All right, so at this point, I feel we can wait a few more minutes and see if there's any additional in from the public, but I believe we have captured everyone who had an intent to address the RAC.
Thanks, Kirby. I think we can likely move forward with the agenda if we have our next folks available. I suppose if anybody shows up that intended to speak between 1:30 and 2, then we can find a slot for them to talk, if that makes some sense.
Great. All right, so then with that, our next presenters, I believe I saw Diane. There's Diane. Joel and John are together, yes?
Yep.
Okay.
We're here together, Kirby.
Great. Are you prepared? Are you sharing your screens, or would you like Donna to assist with screen share?
Donna can do the screen share, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, Donna. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel, John, and Diane. And the three of you, if you could please just introduce yourselves briefly before you go ahead and get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Humphreys. I'm the branch chief of resources out of the state office in Lakewood.
Good afternoon, John Ring. I'm the forestry program lead out of the state office.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Maston-Dixon. I'm the State Fuels Program Manager out of the Colorado State Office based out of Grand Junction.
And good afternoon, John Kaminsky, Field Office Manager for the Gunnison Field Office.
All right, I think we're ready to get started now. So today we've got a three-part kind of presentation related to some new executive orders that have been unveiled in the last couple months that focus on timber and forestry and timber, along with wildfire risk reduction. Usually it's these two components of both sound forest management relate obviously to wildfire risk reduction, and in recent couple months, we've had two EOs that have been rolled out related to both of that. One focuses more on timber and forest products and reducing wildfire risk in healthy forests. The other executive order is more focused on supply chains and whatnot. Next slide, please. So this, I'm going to kind of give an overview real briefly of the two different executive orders. And this one is the one that expands on current timber production across the federal, the U.S. And obviously it affects BLM land since we manage a number of acres of forest. And also to be noted on this too, there's a number of timelines on these different executive orders with the expansion of timber production, and this one also includes sound forest management. John will go into some examples about our forestry efforts in the state, and Diane's going to then later on talk about some of the efforts on wildfire risk reduction with some examples. As you note, there's obviously a timeline on implementing some different actions related to these executive orders. The first one that's is on after 30 days is to use good neighbor authority, stewardship agreements, and other different mechanisms to hopefully increase production of timber across the U.S. I would say the good news for us in BLM Colorado is that we already have good neighbor authority agreements in place and stewardship agreements as well. So that's really ongoing work for us. And Diane will then present on how we're doing some of the sound forest management related to that. On the next timeline too, sometimes these timelines also apply to different agencies, and sometimes the different agencies or departments are really the lead one on that. And the one that's due up in 60 days is falls on as the Fish and Wildlife Service and also Department of Commerce, who oversees NOAA Fisheries, that has that are lead agencies on the Endangered Species Act. But they will be working with other departments in both Ag and Interior, such as BLM, on looking for efficiencies related to the Endangered Species Act within the next 60 days. Something that is going to be due within the next 90 days is there's been some data calls on this, and it's basically how many acres of timber, or actually board feet is the measurable item in this case, that we do in the next 90 days will provide kind of an estimate of what we expect to do over the next 4 years related to harvest. And then the next item that's up that you'll see on the executive order that's an actionable item is related to white bark pine. That's again a Section 7 issue related to the Endangered Species Act. There is no white bark pine known to occur in Colorado, so that probably does not really have an impact to us in Colorado. It will impact other states, obviously where that species occurs. The other items that have been put forward in this executive order to help speed up timber production is related to the greater use of categorical exclusions, applying categorical exclusions that are already in place if we follow other applicable and appropriate laws as necessary to then put those CXs in place to help reduce National Environmental Policy Act timelines on that. And then there's another one related to another categorical exclusion, or CX, timeline out for 280 days. That one's been related to more on the thinning side. And again, the caveat in those use of CXs is related to other appropriate laws, and I'm trying to incorporate that into agencies like BLM. And the whole goal is to help streamline the permitting process related to timber production and timber harvest and forest production, forest products. And one of the other things that was mentioned in this executive order, again, falls on more at the secretary level on this. And these items I'm talking about are actionable, but typically led by the secretary, or in our case, headquarters at higher levels. And then we at the state office level are going to implement those actions as deemed appropriate. Next slide, please. So this is the other executive order that was recently issued. This one applies mostly to Department of Commerce, or Secretary of Commerce, and Department of Defense on this one. And this one really gets into, it's really more of a supply chain, national security led effort here on this executive order, but it still applies to BLM because of our obvious ties to managing public lands. Obviously, it will apply to Forest Service as well, and other public land managers that manage large chunks of forests related to this. There's some timelines related to both Secretary of Commerce and DOD doing review processes to see if there's threat to national security. And then there could be incentives offered to help increase timber production and or tariffs also as well. Next slide, please. This is kind of a quick little overview of what we've done so far. And I think it's maybe about 30 days. I'm not quite positive off top of my head on the timeline of since these EOs were signed. But this is what we've done so far as an agency. BLM headquarters is leading the effort, like I mentioned earlier, on implementing these executive orders. HQ has been starting to work on action plans, and yesterday, or excuse me, a couple days ago, March 31st, they issued a memo. Again, it's looking at the amount of timber that we can harvest in current and out years for those types of projections. Again, it's going back into things that we're already doing with Good Neighbor Authority, make people aware, use Good Neighbor Authority. John's going to talk about some of those examples here in a little bit of how we're doing that across the state and stewardship as well. So we're maximizing our ability to harvest timber, provide those different types of forest products. And also on this, we've been we've been responding to several data calls. That's one of the things that we'll probably be doing out of the state office. It could also then affect field and district offices as well, but we'll try to respond to these data calls as needed related to timber, the volumes of sales, staffing needs, the different funding across the state that we need, and basically capacity. And if we identify different bottlenecks out there, one of the other things I kind of, I glossed over was then also doing review of our land use plans across the state, making sure that our land use plans are offering, our timber is available and we don't necessarily have constraints on in our land use plans. So we could be looking at plan maintenance revisions or amendments as appropriate on our land use plans. Next slide, and I'll let John take over from there.
Yep. So I'm just going to talk about where we're at with the forestry program in general in Colorado right now. For the last 5 years, we've harvested a little over 5 million board feet, and then an average of a little over 8,000 of green tons for biomass. My expectation is if we can get some certain challenges addressed, we would be able to do closer to 9 million board feet and closer to 20,000 tons of biomass. So, and a surprising statistic I think we'll see in the next slide, but BLM Colorado was the second in the nation for volume offered in 2023. Only second to ONC lands, which has a mandate to harvest. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is kind of showing that graph. So it's not showing volume, it's showing millions of dollars. So in 2000, you might have already seen this earlier today, but in 2023, Colorado, 24-point-something million dollars, which put us second in the nation. Next slide, please. So this is where we're at with staffing right now. We're kind of in a rebuild mode. We lost 2 foresters last year, one to retirement and one to taking a new position. And so currently we have a forester in Gunnison Field Office and Royal Gorge Field Office. We have 2 positions that are vacant, but on the TO, and that's the Kremlin Field Office, and then a zoned like GNA forester for our Northwest District. And, part of this is coming up with a plan of how we could increase productivity. And I think, a forester in the Trace Rios Field Office, one in our San Luis Valley Field Office, and then a forestry tech to go along with our forester in Royal Gorge would really help us get at this more production in the timber world. Next slide, please. So this was what Joel was talking about earlier. This is kind of where we're at with some of the agreements and things right now. So currently we have a statewide agreement. We just renewed it again. So we're in our 11th year of doing our Good Neighbor Authority agreement with the Colorado State Forest Service. And we do forestry and fuels work across the state with that. We also have a Good Neighbor Authority with Colorado State Forest Service in the San Luis Valley, just for their area, I guess. Again, forestry and fuels work across the field office. We have a statewide stewardship with Mule Deer Foundation that is wrapping up this year. That was a 10-year agreement that we will be wrapping up, and that was mostly fuels work, but also wildlife habitat and a little bit of forest restoration work. And we do have a statewide cooperative agreement with the National Forest Foundation. And I think we're the second state or one of the first states in BLM nation in the nation to be lucky enough to have an agreement with them. They're typically exclusive with the U.S. Forest Service, but we have an opportunity to do some tethered logging, which is, I don't know if anybody's seen over Monterey Pass. U.S. Forest Service did a couple of years ago, but we're looking to hopefully get that contract signed this summer. Next slide, please. Oh, so challenges, you know, these are probably universal across every agency, but funding, especially right now, we're kind of stuck not being able to use our agreements and other things. NEPA bottlenecks. I mean, with lower staffing in some field offices, NEPA takes longer, and it's harder to get NEPA to get these projects done, which is because of staff shortages. And then something that we've been working on, like at the governor's level with the FHAC Forest Health Advisory Council, is working with forest industry capacity. There's really only one large mill in the state, and being able to, if we're going to be able to produce more timber, we need someone to take it. So we're working on that as well. Next slide, please. Yeah.
Well, before I take over talking about fuels, it looks like there is a question. Loretta, would you like to ask your question?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
We hear ya.
Okay, so I recently attended the State of the Basin Symposium in Alamosa regarding the extreme stress our basin is going to have in this coming year relative to aquifer reduction and total extreme drought. And thinning of the forest canopy is a huge issue in terms of early runoff and how that contributes to what we owe the Rio Grande Compact and what Bureau of Reclamation is doing in that regard. And I would just like to know if those sorts of considerations are being included in this increased thinning of the forest.
Yeah, Loretta, I think, yes, they would be. They'd be addressed in the NEPA process at the field office level. We would look at those things when we do our NEPA to do these projects. And drought is definitely high on our priority list of things to look at when we do our analysis.
My other concern is also that I'm not clear on whether BLM has gotten any staff cuts like the Forest Service has in the valley here, but it's been a huge outcry in this area, and increased management of forest thinning and various things like that put out by the EO seems sort of counterintuitive. You got to put out more production with fewer people. I don't understand how this is going to happen.
I agree with that notion, and I don't really have a comment on it.
Okay, well, I understand it's politically sensitive for staff people, so I didn't really expect an answer, but I think the statement needs to be made that they expect more production with fewer staff, and this just seems like people that have never been in the West and tromped around any wilderness area to understand what the issues really are.
I'll wade in. I'm happy to jump in and take this one. You know, I think we are in conversations with the department and with headquarters right now about our capacity needs for this program. Of course, there's a lot of new goals and targets that come with this executive order. And so it's certainly a conversation we're having at the executive leadership team level in BLM. You know, obviously taking into account some of the reductions in staffing that we've seen, but really looking at these priorities and thinking about how we can shift folks that might have been focusing on other things to pick up these priorities. And also, you know, conversations about new staffing we might need to kind of fill in some of these gaps that we have in field offices that have vacancies and perhaps in field offices that don't have an active forestry position or focus on their table organization. So very, very much noted, and we're working with the department on it.
Just one more comment, and that is, as RAC members, I would like some clarification from you regarding what can we do to support that issue without stepping on toes and creating unnecessary drama, because it's very frustrating for us. I think I can speak for all of us, probably, maybe not, but that what can we do to support you in this other than attending RAC meetings?
You know, I don't want to wade into this too deeply and get into kind of personnel issues, but I think, you know, like we've talked about today, I think some of the most important things you can do to support BLM in general are just talking about, you know, all the work that we do. And I think getting back to what we were talking about earlier with the REC program or with our grazing program, you know, tell the story that we have a tremendous workload and we need people on the ground to do the work. And I think in particularly, you know, the RAC, you all are well aware and have connections with our field offices and district offices in particular. You know, we need that boots on the ground. So I think it just gets back to kind of telling the story of BLM. And I think the RACs have always done a very good job of that.
We've got another hand up if we want to take that real fast, and then I'll jump into fuels. Irene, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I guess I had a question about the sort of expediting the NEPA requirements for the Endangered Species Act, and I'm just wondering, is that worrisome? I feel like, I guess I just want to hear more about that, because I guess I'm a little bit concerned that things will get expedited a little too quickly, and that there could be, or that you'll be forced to ignore some findings about endangered species. So anyway, thank you. I'd be interested to hear that.
I'll take this one real quick on the Endangered Species Act. If you do go back through the executive order, there are caveats making sure that we follow the applicable laws and procedures. The Secretary of Interior is also the individual that oversees Fish and Wildlife Service, along with, then that's where it's always interesting with Commerce as well, since Commerce, that segment of government, that department oversees NOAA fisheries, which is kind of like the other component related to the Endangered Species Act. And there are other processes out there to still follow the law and to do the due diligence under the ESA related to that. There are some other processes that we've utilized in the past to help streamline the consultation process, but still follow the law and the spirit of ESA on that.
Diane, do you want to take Lynn's question and then we'll move into your section?
Sure. Go ahead, Lynn.
Sure, thank you for taking this question anyway. I really appreciate, I think it was Irene, bringing up the Endangered Species Act, and I may be mixing and matching the different speakers here, but it sounds like there's multiple different initiatives. One might be to dispose of federal lands, one might be to increase timber production under a national security emergency. Another sounds like we might be looking at following NEPA, but maybe expediting NEPA. And so I just wanted to chime in that it's really important not to move so quickly with one thing that we hurt others. And, you know, the county I'm from, Uray County, we have timber at the top of the watershed. It's in federal land, but it's not managed by the BLM on our side. But just, I'm a little bit familiar from driving over Monarch Pass. It appears that some of the helicopter logging can sometimes cause some gullying or erosion if it's not given a chance to be properly analyzed, or maybe it needs extra analyzing. So I just wanted to chime in that we can continue the BLM's good work of balancing the competing interests and not moving so quickly in the short term that we hurt something in the long term. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. All right, well, we will go ahead and look at the fuels program a little bit now. And we really work hand in hand with the forestry program. A lot of times, if there is a forestry project, there's also a fuels management component to it. So a lot of what John mentioned feeds into the fuels program very well, especially when it comes to partnerships. So for this fiscal year, 25, the majority of our treatment budget is coming from bipartisan infrastructure law, bill, Infrastructure Investment, Job Act, IIJA, kind of whatever of the acronyms you're most familiar with. It's coming from that program of work. And with those dollars, there are certain aspects that we have to meet in order for it to qualify for that funding. So we are really focusing on hazardous fuels reduction in wildland-urban interface, or WUI, or areas that are impacting drinking water. So if they're not quite in WUI, but we know that it's really important for some of our other infrastructure, that would qualify, and in the areas of the highest wildfire risk. So with that, a lot of it is in forested systems because we know that those have such an impact on WUI or areas of drinking water. So about 73% of those projects have a forestry or a forest management component. And when I say forest management, from the fuel side, we might not be looking so much at pulling a product out of those systems, but really managing for forest health so that we have the ecosystem functions that we're looking at to make things more wildfire resilient or to give us better holding areas for any type of wildfires that might happen. So of that 73%, when we look, full life cycle of a project, we're doing about 50,000 acres of surveying and kind of pre-treatment monitoring, about 9,000 acres of actual treatment on the ground, and then about 50,000 acres of post-treatment monitoring, because that full life cycle is really important to understand the full scope of these treatments, conditions before we act and conditions after we act. And then 8 of these projects, about 1,400 acres, are being completed through a Good Neighbor Authority GNA agreement with Colorado State Forest Service. John mentioned that we currently have 2 of those right now. And just to highlight a couple of those that are happening around the state. So up in the Northwest, we have the Emerald Mountain Project up in Routt County. In Rocky Mountain, we have the Poncha Pass Project happening in Chaffee County. And down in Southwest, we have the Grassy Mountain Shared Stewardship Project in La Plata County. And working with these GNA agreements, there's so many benefits about them. One of which is that it's a capacity builder. As John mentioned, we do have some forestry vacancies, and being able to use these agreements, we get more of that capacity. Plus, we get all of the benefit of Colorado State Forest Service's knowledge. They really are the preemptive forestry arm of the state of Colorado. They're super knowledgeable folks. So we learn a lot. We get to take advantage of their knowledge as we're designing and implementing these projects. Plus, it allows us to design these projects in a way that work on multiple land ownership types. So this is especially beneficial in areas of WUI where we might have BLM adjacent to private lands, adjacent to state lands, or even our other federal land management partners. We've had some of these that are adjacent to U.S. Forest Service as well. And it lets us build these projects in a way that we're getting more benefit on more acres and really working together to do this. So we've had a lot of successes with this so far, and I'm excited to see these GNA projects keep going forward. We also have other agreements, as John mentioned, with Mule Deer Foundation, and we're getting into some new work with the National Forestry Foundation. So I mentioned just a couple of projects that we have going on, but then I also wanted to highlight probably one of our more interesting, definitely one of our more complex projects that we have going on in the state. And John Kaminsky out of the Gunnison Field Office, we can kind of tag team this. He's the local knowledge here. Next slide, please. This is the North Powderhorn Fuels Project. So this is in the Gunnison Field Office, mostly in Gunnison and Hinsdale counties. So the map that's on the right side of the screen, if you look at the southwest corner, that's the town of Lake City. And then if you look up at the northeast corner, that's the community of Powderhorn. And then the project area, that is the dark outline of the whole area of BLM land. It is about 90,000 acres total. The west bounding box is Highway 149, or part of it is also the Lake Fork of the Gunnison River. The eastern bounding box is, let's see, that's County Road 27 and Seboya Creek. And then there is National Forest to the south of the project area. So this is a really neat area of Colorado. It has some of our really large flat top alpine tundra areas and just some really amazing scenery. John, do you want to say anything about just the special qualities of this area?
Sure. Yeah, this is the world's largest flat top tundra covered area. It is a wilderness, Powderhorn Wilderness. I believe it was Congress enabled that in 1993. Before that, it was called a primitive area. This is it's a watershed. It feeds the Lake Fork of the Gunnison, as well as some of the other creeks that flow into the main stem of the Gunnison at Blue Mesa Reservoir. So, and it's important bighorn habitat, elk habitat, deer habitat, a favorite area for SRPs, special recreation permit holders, to guide folks on hunting trips in the fall, as well as fishing some of those high altitude lakes. So very proximal to Lake City and Gunnison, and very important to us. And, you know, when we really saw the decimation of the forest due to beetle kill and the loading of fuels in this area, we, in proximity to Lake City and so forth, that was kind of our indication that it was time to act and look at how we could treat these areas with a variety of fuels treatments, not only forest thinning, but some mechanical, some burning, you know, harvest where we can, where there is merchantable timber, but looking at the whole variety of tools in the toolbox to address some of these fuel situations over the next 15 years.
Thanks, John. So as John mentioned, there's going to be a variety of fuels management strategies implemented here. Over the next 15 years, we are looking to treat about 20,000 acres of this project area within and adjacent to the Powderhorn Wilderness area and the Wilderness Study area. And the decision record for this environmental assessment was signed last summer, but this got introduced to the field office interdisciplinary team way back in 2016. So this is years in the making. There's been a ton of research that's gone into this, a ton of design, redesign, feedback, public outreach. So we're really excited that this programmatic document has come to fruition, And there has been some amount of fuels treatments outside the wilderness area that has already happened, but we're excited to bring some of that work into the rest of the project area. So this year in 2025, some more of the thinning work, mostly on the outside of the wilderness area, will continue. And then as there are burn windows, we are looking to introduce prescribed fire as conditions allow. We have a pretty specific burn criteria that we're looking for this. Next slide, please. So some of the aspects that we're looking at, before I get into kind of some of the objectives here, I want to point out this figure, these two figures that are on the left. So the top image, that shows Powderhorn Lake in 2011. Absolutely beautiful, scenic. It's a really special area if you've ever had the chance to get into this wilderness. But the photo below, that shows the same area in 2022, so just a little over 10 years later. And what you're seeing is almost complete kill from Engelmann spruce, and it's the spruce beetle mostly in this area. This area just got hit really, really hard with spruce beetle. And it's really bringing down the forest health and just creating conditions for catastrophic wildfire. And if that were to occur, we could see a lot of the downstream impacts that happen from catastrophic wildfire, especially in this area. We'd be concerned about erosion and loss of resilience. When these fires happen in these closed canopies with a lot of fuel loading, they burn really hot and they burn for a long time. And that really makes your soil struggle to respond after. You either lose your soil or it just gets burned so thoroughly that you lose a lot of your seed bank. It makes the risk for invasive species coming in really high. So we, as much as we possibly can, want to avoid that risk. And the way that we can do that is by bringing in fire and other treatment types in a very controlled manner, in smaller, patchier scales, to increase heterogeneity and to mimic some of the disturbance regimes that this area used to see. So over the next 15 years, again, we want to treat up to 20,000 acres with a maximum of 2,500 acres per year within the whole design area. Again, to bring back some of these disturbances in a more controlled way. This is going to give the forest the chance to build some resiliency and have the ability to respond on its own then when other disturbance events do happen. This also stimulates understory shrubs, grasses, and forbs, which is projected to improve wildlife habitat, which improves hunting, which improves so many other aspects and resources that we care about in this area. We're also looking to target some of these treatments around areas where there are aspen underneath, giving chances for aspen regeneration. And again, this just helps these natural systems recuperate on their own. We can also create some defensible spaces, places to tie in for wildland fire management so that if there are ignitions that happen, we know which areas that we're going to be able to manage and have a little bit better safety outcomes for our firefighting strategies. And even though bringing management into wilderness is a little bit different than what we've done in the past, there's a lot of abilities to enhance wilderness values with these treatments. Again, by bringing in the system's ability to respond to disturbance, it will prolong the health of these areas and manage for better wilderness values into the future. With that, next slide, please. As I mentioned, this has been a long time coming. A lot of work, a lot of coordination has gone into this, a lot of research, some very interesting studies aided by Western Colorado University, Colorado State Forest Service, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. A lot has gone into this, and we're very excited to give these landscapes a little bit of help and get them on the right track so that they can respond on their own as we see disturbance. So I see a hand up. Linda, go ahead.
Hi. One of the first slides you showed, I thought talked about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was what was funding this work. Was that accurate? Did I see that?
So that is a big part of our fuels program as a whole. And yes, some of bill funding has contributed to this North Powderhorn Fuels project. And again, we're looking, oh, please go ahead.
No, sorry. So my question is that since that law has passed Congress and been appropriated, I guess, is that funding secure for you to continue your work?
For fiscal year 25, yes, we have that funding. We are able to spend those dollars as they have been given to us. For fiscal year 26, that is the way that funding package was written as to be appropriated through fiscal year 26. We're going to see if anything happens between now and then. Potentially if something did come through Congress, they could direct those funds, but for right now, we are planning to continue with these projects as appropriated.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions, Kirby, I'll turn it back to, oh, Callie, go ahead.
Oh, Callie.
Sorry, I'm a little slow on the draw here. And hi, Diane, nice to see you, and thanks to see you working on forestry stuff. Very good. So I guess I just wanted to note, I'm hearing some concerns that we may not be taking care of the resources and the wildlife and so forth. And I guess I just want to say my background is in the conservation districts, and I believe we can do it all. And so while I have my concerns, I do trust that we're going to come out of the current situation with the reduced staff in better shape than where we are right now. I think I'm hopeful that we will hire people that will get out on the ground and get the job done. I know we're going to have to streamline NEPA in order to get that done, but we need to do that because we've been look at the shape of our forests. Obviously it's not working. So something had to change. So let's spend more time focusing on what we can do and what we will do on the ground rather than why we shouldn't be doing that. So I'm excited for the future. I think that we'll see some good things over the next couple of years. It's going to take a little bit. There's always a change in every administration. I do get a little frustrated with the making it like it's the end of the world when we have a change in our administration. We'll be fine. I'm hopeful, and I just wanted to let people know I don't think we're all on that same page. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. And I share your excitement. This work, especially fuels and forestry, I think it's exciting work. It's real work on the ground. It has a lot of benefits, obviously for fuels and wildfire risk reduction, but I do think that a lot of our projects do see benefit to wildlife. That's always something that we're talking about with our interdisciplinary teams as we're designing these projects. And so our primary objective might be fuels reduction, but our secondary objectives, how we design these projects, it always has a a wildlife note in there. How can we make this beneficial for our native wildlife species as well?
Thanks.
Thank you. I think next was Justin and then Merritt.
Yeah, that was a really good presentation, and I think yeah, I think that this last little round of comments I think answered some of my questions or reiterated some of what I was thinking. I definitely don't think we need to. I don't think expediting some of these processes necessarily equates to failing to take care of wildlife in those situations. Thinking about this Gunnison County part of the world, the Gunnison Field Office, that area. We have a lot of good examples of collaborative forest restoration projects with the Forest Service in this area, and it's complex. When you're talking about streamlining some of these NEPA processes, I'm wondering, I guess when I'm looking back at some of these other collaborative forest restoration efforts, packaging treatments into one collaborative NEPA process, to me, was one of the really big selling points on some of those. I know that's not something you can turn around in a couple weeks and get up and running, but is that something that you've looked into? And have you looked into partnerships with Colorado Forest Restoration Institute and different ways to engage with the public on some of this stuff?
So in terms of streamlining, packaging, all of those things, when we do a categorical exclusion, we still have to have other NEPA in place that has analyzed the area. We have a checklist that we follow for categorical exclusion. So we still have to look at these. These do not take the place of site scale planning, but where there are certain criteria that is really similar, if we get 50 of the same type of projects, same similar conditions that we have analyzed, that we have gone through all of these partnerships and really thoughtful design processes, it makes the on the ground piece just a little bit quicker. That's where some of these categorical exclusions come into play. But we still need that upfront work, that upfront collaboration to identify where these areas are, where the priorities are. And, with those collaborative processes, those take an all lands, all hands approach. A lot of our actions are on the BLM, but BLM is only one aspect of managing healthy forests. We know that we have so many other land managers, private lands, state lands, or other partners that are part of this. So, through those processes, we have our program of work that we're doing on BLM, but Forest Service has theirs, the state has theirs, the counties have theirs. So that it really helps you look at the whole landscape, not just what we manage with BLM.
Yeah, very, very well put. I think that's a very good answer. One kind of consistent thing that I've seen in these processes is, if somebody, the people that have the biggest amounts of concern with these types of projects, I think there's kind of a large line between green tree treatments and standing dead or salvage treatments. And looking at some of these images from 2022, my big concern there is that merchantability for some of this is going to be severely impacted in very short order. And I'm wondering, if taking that private industry component out of those treatments is if you take that out of the equation, is this something that still is going to be economically feasible to achieve at a reasonable scale?
So there's a couple different pieces here. When we're talking about the forestry component of these treatments, you're right. If they have been standing dead for long enough, sometimes there's just not value anymore. Sometimes if you can time it right, you can get in there when they're still viable. We can lean into kind of the forestry or the salvage aspect of those projects. Awesome. We love when we can do that. In some cases, we can't. And that's where the fuels program and the forestry program differ a little bit, where we are looking at some of the other resource values because we know that there is a downstream economic effect from healthy landscapes, and that provides for a lot. Plus, there's the cost of managing large wildfires. It's, we can do some of the cost work up front, doing the fuels work, and maybe we don't get any merchantable project out of that. But the cost of doing that tends to be a lot lower than the cost of managing a large wildfire after, and doing all of the post-burn response, and doing all of the reseeding and the reforestry. It ends up being a better cost benefit than the alternative. So, we like to make anything as merchantable as we can, but it's still worth doing, even if that's not a viable option.
Very well put. I like your reasoning a lot.
Merritt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I really appreciate your last comment there about the cost benefit. And what I was going to say is that's exactly what we're seeing here. As some of y'all know, we had the East Troublesome Fire, second biggest fire in Colorado. And we're seeing those impacts of what happened of 30 years of doing nothing and just acres and acres and thousands of acres of standing dead that had no commercial value and no salvage value either. So, and no grazing was allowed on a huge part of that area, even though there was grazing historically in the past. And I think that we're seeing those negative impacts now. And as a result of that, I think attitudes in DC and some of the federal agencies are changing. And I know that even our local wildfire council, which I sit on the board of, has got so much action and so much activity and interest. We actually hired a full-time executive director and a full-time staff member just for mitigation. And it was, until this last year, it was just a volunteer agency. So there's just tons of strategic fuels reduction projects and home hardening and home defensible space things going on, because the impacts of these huge fires, just like you mentioned, are incredible in terms of the huge gashes in the hillside of the erosion, because there's no soil to absorb these moisture. Even a 1-inch rainstorm, which isn't huge, but pretty significant, creates huge gullies and washes out roads. We've had to resize, triple or double culverts on just county roads and state highways where it doesn't absorb and recharge the aquifer and slow down this runoff. I mean, there's just a huge amount of impacts that it adds to the cost. That, yes, logging has some impacts. Yes, it's ugly. I get it. We don't want to do it. But I think these fires, to me, are way more destructive and catastrophic in terms of the negative long-term impacts. We're still dealing with this, and literally just the touch over 4 years later, and we will be dealing with it for a long time afterwards. Some of this soil is still sterilized and won't grow anything yet. So just really appreciate the presentation and the direction that we're going with this. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Merritt.
you. Go ahead, Gina.
Hi, thanks so much. Really appreciated the presentation. I have a quick question, and I don't know if you're going to have the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. So with all this production, our focus in doing more timber production, I'm wondering if there will be any additional investment in infrastructure, right? In terms of more sawmills, or even just to move the lumber throughout the state or across state, whatever. But obviously, I know those northwestern states have a lot more infrastructure, as they've been doing this a bit, well, I don't want to say a bit longer, but their industries are larger in that sector, if you will. So for Colorado, so I'm gonna say, I used to know a stat of how many active sawmills we have, but it's not probably enough to take care of, I guess, what the executive order is in terms of the mass amount of production that's coming. So will there be an investment to help, I guess, fulfill or carry out the increasing production of timber?
So I'll let John Ring take that one.
Yeah, I don't know about, at least from the BLM side. I know USDA does invest in sawmills and things like that, like the gypsum mill that actually just went bankrupt, I think last year or whatever. They have loans for that, rural development loans and stuff like that. I don't know about the investment. And I guess I'll say this, when we're talking about increasing timber production, I guess. Colorado, for at least BLM, is we're still a forest health state. We're not like Oregon or Washington, where we're growth and yield and trying to make as much money as they can. We're not that state. So by increasing these amounts, we're just doing more forest health treatments. I think the forest industry question is quite honestly a larger state issue than more than just BLM or Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, or Colorado State Forest Service can solve. But I know we've been talking about it at the FHC and others to try and figure out if we do have the opportunity to increase treatments, and where would this material go? And I don't know. I've been doing this 15 years and we haven't solved it yet. So yeah, it's definitely a question that we need to figure out.
Thank you so much.
Callie?
So yeah, thank you. And really just kind of following up on what Gina had said. So the conservation districts that I used to work for had been working in the forestry side of things for quite a while. And back, it's been several years, but in our conversations with the forest industry, which I don't know if there's anybody online that's in that industry, but I think we need to have a conversation with them very soon. I assume there's already been some, but if we haven't, very soon, what can the government, I don't want the government in the business, but what can the government do to help them? And what used to be the conversation was if they could get like 10-year contracts so that they knew they had timber, material for that long or longer, then they could go to the bank and get a loan. But if they're only getting these short-term contracts, they don't ever know, based on the next administration, whether they will be able to continue with timber, and banks aren't going to loan them money. So I think that's one of the things that we might be able to help them with, is if we did longer-term contracts, which would probably just mean more acreage in a contract. I don't know what that really means. Along that line, I just wanted to highlight here in the White River that we do have a group that's come together that is really wanting to focus on forest health and forest treatments. And I want to really thank our local BLM office for stepping up and being the one that really come to the table with the Good Neighbor Authority to be able to say, let's get her done. And that's just what I have seen in this office, is an attitude of get her done. And I really appreciate that. So hopefully funding will release and we'll be able to start moving forward again with that soon. Thanks.
Go ahead, Doug.
Just kind of a couple of things to add, or I guess observations from this conversation. I think as John and Diane and Joel have pointed out, we are a smaller player when it comes to timber harvest here in Colorado, but we're definitely part of the conversation, right? And I think, in partnering with the Forest Service, in working with the state, we have an opportunity to be part of that conversation around, some of these larger questions around mill capacity and things like that. And so one of the things that we're working on right now in partnership with the state is kind of a memorandum of understanding or an agreement to push forward the concept of shared stewardship. And I think the Forest Service, USDA, has an agreement with the State Department of Natural Resources right now that really kind of talks about this, that we all need to work together to address these issues, because our agreements aren't going to be the one thing that solves this challenge with milling. The Forest Services agreements aren't, the states aren't, but maybe collectively we can kind of put our heads together, and give some of these mills the certainty that they need going into the future to address not only, timber harvesting for production purposes, but also some of the wildfire risk work that we need to be doing. And so just kind of heads up there that we really hope to kind of get all the collaborators together and kind of attack all these problems together, because I think each individually, we're probably not going to be able to provide the certainty to the milling community and others to get the job done.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments from members of the RAC or questions? Okay, well, thank you to Joel, John, Diane, John, for presenting on this topic. I think great discussion and good engagement. So thank you again. And just a reminder to everyone, all the presentations are in one PDF available on the website, and I will put that link back in. But if you need to go back or you're interested in referencing any of the materials, they are all available on the website. I do think I'll probably upload a new version later today or early tomorrow for a couple of quick spelling edits on a couple slides, but the content should be pretty much the same. So good reference. We are 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So at this point, I am going to put us on our break, which was supposed to be at 3. It will now be at 2:45. Please rejoin us at 3 o'clock for our overview of BLM Colorado's energy program. We'll see you all back here at 3 o'clock. All right. Hello, everyone. It is 3 o'clock. So hopefully we are returning, everyone's returning from break. And we can get started with our next meeting or our next presentation. Say meeting, new presentation. So we'll go ahead and just give everyone another 30 seconds or so to return. And get back on. And then AG, and then Kemba, and I think Malia might be on as well. So our next session is an overview of BLM Colorado's energy program. And this is just an information session, kind of get you up to speed on the different energy programs we have within the state that BLM manages. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to AG, but I would just again remind and ask if the other presenters just reintroduce yourself to the group before you get started. Thanks a lot. And AG, just so you know, right now, all we see is what we see is your like working PowerPoint. So if you think you are sharing the slide, share the presentation version.
Okay, how about now? Is that better?
Nope. Nope.
No? Still? Okay. This is the correct presentation, but let's see.
Hit function 5 and it should start your presentation.
You guys see it? I'm on the presentation mode right now, so.
Yeah, it just might be on the screen you're sharing it on.
Okay, 1 second. How about now?
Now I just see your very pretty desktop background. If you guys want to do introductions, I will try to get it pulled up.
Okay, I'll stop sharing then.
Okay.
All right, my name is AG Al-Madani. I'm the Deputy State Director for Energy Laws and Minerals, and I have also 2 of my team members here. They can go introduce themselves. Kimba.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimba Anderson. I am the Branch Chief of Fluid Minerals at the State Office.
Malia.
Good afternoon. My name is Malia Burton. I'm the Branch Chief for Lands, Realty, and Renewable Energy.
Right, we have a small presentation for everyone to talk about specifically our division here. I mean, I know the energy sector is the one that is dominating the conversations, but our program is a little bit broader than just the oil and gas world. But we have multiple programs within our division. We'll give you a little bit of flavor of what we do and what kind of work that we're involved in, and also the type of work that is pending and across the board from all our divisions. So Colorado Division for Energy Laws and Minerals is predominantly made of 3 programs or branches. We have the solid minerals program, and then we have the fluid mineral program, and also we have the land and realty and renewable energy program. Each program have a critical role to play in developing of energy and real estate across the state. Next, please. So I'm going to go in each one briefly and just explain some of the things that we are doing for each program. This is from the state office perspective, and we provide leadership coordinations on fluid mineral policies. We deal with leases, lease sales, lease stipulations. We deal with bonding, productions. We deal with specifically for the fluid mineral world, reservoir management, geothermals, also all the coordinations related to state, locals, and tribe across the BLM Colorado. Next. Next slide, please. Similarly, for the solid minerals, the overall leadership policy directions. And as I said, each program has their own sub-activities they deal with. Our solid minerals deal with leasable, locatable, and saleable resources. And also part of this program, we deal with hazmats and AML program as well. Also similarly, like the oil and gas world, leases, operation modifications of mining operations, bond management, coordinations of coal and non-energy leasable resources. Next, similarly for the branch of land and realty and renewable energy, this one is a little bit bigger than the others in terms of what they're responsible for. They focus on a lot of different areas. Obviously, the realty world is big. We deal with land use permitting, right of way, easements, and also we deal with acquisitions, disposals, exchange, withdrawal, and plus to that group also they manage renewable energy developments across the state. Next, please. For the oil and gas stats, we can see that our program have a lot of work going on for them, even though we are very small in number of staffing and number of budgeting. But we as you saw earlier today from Lisa's presentations, we have a huge impact on the local economy and the nation economy overall. Our program, our oil and gas program, manage a total of close to 3,000 leases, over almost 2.5 million acres. Out of that almost 3,000 leases, we have 2,155 leases that is producing right now, and almost 1.5 million acre is held by productions. Over 14,000 wells producing. Last year we completed 236 APDs. We have about 845 idle well. Idle well, basically well is not producing, that's being shut in or being temporarily abandoned. An orphan well, we have about 51. An orphan well is a well that has no responsible party, and that the bond that we have is not sufficient enough to plug that well, so we consider that well as orphan. Next, and in the last 2 years or 3 years here in Colorado, we have done a lot of great work on completing a lot of our plan amendments, and now since they all are done, we are back to one of our biggest workload, which is lease sales. We're going to have a few coming up. We are back into our quarterly lease sale planning. We going to have one in September. The NEPA right now is going through common periods. Is the last day for that will be April 13, and all common can be submitted to our e-planning. And we have another one planning for December. Right now we're reviewing the comment from a scoping period that closed middle of last month. And we're also planning to have one in the first quarter. The scoping will be scheduled in spring, late spring. For the solid mineral program, as said, we have multiple programs within the solid minerals. We have the mineral material program that is managing a lot of work, managing 59 operations, pending authorized or under contract. They manage about 61 operations pending authorized free use permits. They manage about 17 community pits. They manage about 26 common use area. And for our coal program, we manage about 47 coal and 8 non-energy leasable and 1 oil shale lease. For the mining law program, approximately managing 74 mining plan of operations. We manage about 15,000 waiver and patents mining claims. We receive annually about 3,000 mining claim, and we kind of go through and see what is actually good to go or not. We close annually about 2,500 mine claim. The other big program we have, which is the abandoned mine and hazmat program, there's about 3,600 AML closure related sites. We manage about 46 circular actions and 61 RCRA cleanup annually. We manage about 20 facility for RCRA compliance. Next. And for the renewable energy world, we don't really have a specific actual either solar, wind, and sometime geothermal fall under this since it's considered renewable energy source. We don't really have anything active, but we are involved in certain big projects like transmission lines. Here's the list of some of the transmission lines that we are working on or go through our state, and we have a part to play in completing those projects. Transwest Express is a big one, Gateway South, and the XL transmission lines. And there's a lot of detail on them, but they are big projects. There are multiple state involvements, and we are fortunate to be part of this big effort. Next, please. For solar energy, we do see a little bit of interest, but we haven't had anything really materialized on actual completed project yet. We had one in the Trail Gulch energy zone. That application was withdrew. Nothing in that area anymore. We have 2 interest applications out of the Grand Junction field office. We're still going through that processes, and hopefully those can be materialized on actual project. There's interest in the UFO area, still in the development phase. We have not received an official application. We just initial meetings and discussions about those type of projects. And the other big workload we have, which is our withdrawal project that we work on, we have the Dorita withdrawal. And if you're following through the presentation, you can see the area they are in and the offices and who's behind the applications and how big those withdrawal in terms of acreage. We have the Dorita is going on that we're spending now, and we have Arapahoe National Wildlife Refuge. We're working on that. The Fort Carson military withdrawal, that's an extension, but we're working on that, and the Whitewater revocations, and also we're working on that currently to complete all those withdrawal. Next, this one is a little bit packed, but this is for our 10 land tenure adjustments. This is a big workload for us also. Project basically across the board in a lot of different field offices, a lot of districts covering a lot of area. Talking about, the big one for us is coming up that we're working on the Lahara acquisitions, that's Clancy Ranch acquisitions. We're working with the field offices in multiple acquisition or direct sale and or exchange. So our portfolio basically cover almost everything from energy, oil and gas, to geothermals, to renewable energy, to land exchange. A small program, as I said at the beginning, very small number of staffs, very small number of budgeting wise, but we kind of have an impact across the board in the BLM on the community that we trying to serve. Next. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I will have Malia and Kimba try to help answer some of those questions. And I'm sure Doug can jump in whenever we are unable to answer those questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I just sort of have a general question, I guess, about new permitting that seems to be part of the administration's executive orders. And maybe this is the appropriate time, or maybe it isn't. But my questions are like specific to the abandoned wells and orphan wells that you are managing right now, are the original permittees, I guess I would like to hope that whoever got those permits and abandoned them or their orphan wells, and if they're putting in for a new permit, would they have to clean up the ones that they already have first? Is that part of the system, or is that not part of today's presentation?
I can give a little bit of background. What is an orphan well? And then Kimba can jump in also. An orphan well, basically, there's no company longer available to do that job. So if a company still exists, we still have them do that work. So
Okay.
that company would no longer be available to do other leasing or get other permits. So we go through almost 2-year processes going after everybody before we can decide if a well is an orphan or not. You know, we go to the operator, let's see, the record holder, there's anyone we think have some type of responsibility to clean those well, we go after them. If we find no one that is available for us to get that work done, then that well will be labeled as orphan, and then we resume the responsibility for that.
Okay, and then my other part would be, I know there's a bond when permits are requested and then granted, and I'm not sure what financial burden falls on BLM for these orphan or abandoned wells, and is there a way to take that information and data and for the future, for the bond to be either increased or so that the taxpayer and BLM aren't left on the hook for that?
I'll let Kimba
I
chat on that.
can take on this, and I'll kind of go a little bit more in detail of what kind of AG was kind of talking. The last administration, I know the last presentations, we talked about Bill and Ira. They changed where the definition of auto well is now 4 years. So last year we entered into an agreement with ECMC where they're actually helping us plug some of our legacy orphan wells. So like what AG was saying, so if the company is considered what we say orphan, we will take their financial assurance or their bond. In June of last year, BLM changed their regulatory on the was over 40 years in the making. We raised our financial insurance or our bond regulations. And some of that actually sunsets this summer, where we're doing away with nationwide bonds and only having lease bonds and statewide bonds. So it did increase. So right now, like they have a nationwide bond, they have to come in with $500,000. So we are going through the current bonds and increasing those. Before that, it was 25,000. So we have, going through each bond and make sure that they are adjusting to inflation.
Okay.
And also
thank you.
some of the mechanism we have in place that just to avoid getting to this situation of a well gone orphan, we do our annual bond reviews as a part of our procedure way before the company go through those type of issues like bankruptcies or anything that will lead us to an orphan situation. We review the bond, we review the operator overall capacity, in terms of their violations and their how many issue they having out there, the quality of the work they're doing, and how many well is not, like we have criteria of well productions. If we consider the number of well that is not producing a lot of oil, that might be, we call it the stripper wells, which is not producing enough to run the operation of that well itself, then we'll issue a bond increase to be able to put us into that safe side. But there's multiple layer that we have to go through before we can get to that orphan situation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just to kind of add another layer to that too, I mean, we have, as was mentioned, kind of bonding requirements or updated bonding requirements. We also have a lot of work that's gone on over the past few years at the state level as well, through the Energy and Carbon Management Commission at the state. And so in addition to our rules, there is now a kind of a fund that operators pay into at the state level that can support orphan wells or orphan well kind of remediation and reclamation in the future at some of these sites. So we kind of have bonding that is available for the individual sites through the companies, and then kind of this fail-safe fund at the state level that we can tap into now to address some of those issues.
Thanks, Doug. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been reading in the news that the orphan well program, as of a couple days ago, the funding that was billed as kind of the once in a generation funding for maybe doing some catch up on the orphan wells, has been halted or frozen or maybe reversed. And then I read the same thing like a month ago, back in February, about the abandoned mine land program. And I just wondered if you could speak to, I understand that there's some funding, that was just described through bonds and through the state, but we just have so much work to do in closing and doing safety and environmental improvements at the abandoned mines and the orphan wells. And that's what I thought the infrastructure money was supposed to be. So can you speak a little more about the funds that are frozen and if you have any sense that they're permanently gone or coming back, or thanks.
Thanks. Doug can jump into this too. Yeah, we did have money through the IRA and the bill that's allocated specifically to address orphan well. And that money was managed by headquarters. Basically, we identify similar. The procedure is the same. We identified a well, and then we had just an extra layer of money that we can tap into to do those cleanups. Same thing with AML sites. Is the procedure is still in place? The money might not be in place, but the procedure is still in place even before we got that money allocated from the previous administration. We still reach out to headquarters. We still follow the same procedure to request funding when funding is available to complete this kind of work. I don't know if this money is going to come back or not. I'm not 100% sure, but we did have money that no longer available for us to do more expedited work.
I guess I'll check in on that and stuff like that. So yeah, even though that we don't have the bill in IRA, we had processes in place that we could get additional funding. And kind of like what Doug says, that that every operator that operates in the state of Colorado has to be bonded, not only if they're doing federal, not only on the federal side, but on the state side as well. And that money, that the bonding that they give on the state side goes in that orphan well fund. And as I stated before, that we have a agreement with the state that they're actually helping us plug in orphan wells. So we were able to utilize some of that bill fund while it was available and then plug some of that. But through our agreement to date, we have plugged 34 wells as of checking with the state today. So some of those are some of those legacy wells that we've done, like the downhole reclamation, but the surface, whatever reason, we ran out of money. And you might have seen some of those in Rangeley, and we've been kind of focused some of it in the northwest part of the state at the moment.
Thanks, Kim and AG. And I don't have too much more to add just in terms of the IRA funds. Some of those funds are on hold right now, and I think we're in the midst of a transition, and we don't have all the answers for everything at this point in time, which is understandable. But I think, as Kemba and AG pointed out, with the connections and the partnerships we have here in the state of Colorado, certainly those priority wells, anything that has an environmental challenge or any risk is being addressed and looked at. We have partnerships that allow us to do that.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, and I'd just like to say too, I think that those P&A standards have really changed since the COGCC and the ECMC got involved. There's a lot more regulation on them than there ever was before. It's way above industry standards. So that's putting a lot of extra cost on plugging these abandoned wells as well.
That's correct. And I think the best way for us to actually avoid getting to those situations is basically do our due diligence early on, annual inspections, keep up with our bond reviews, keep up with the operators operation out there, identify problem early on before we can get to the situation that we are in, an orphan situation. But there's a lot of mechanism for us to be able to minimize that the cost to the public by doing the work upfront. The challenge is, as any other program, is not having enough staff to be able to go out and do inspections annually to be able to cover every well we have out there. Same thing with the funding. But I think for me, that's more preventable measure that we use to be able to identify potential area problems. Usually when we have an NRS go out there or a PET go out there, they do their inspections, they can note things that could be a red flag. That operator, the site, it's not in good conditions. There's not they're not doing a lot of stuff going on out there. That give you an indication maybe this operator is not going to be able to maintain those development for a long time. And then we start reviewing basically what's going on with their productions, and then we issue notice for them to plug or abandon wells or produce wells. Those the tools that we need to focus on. There's the one that give us more early on catching those issues that we can prevent us in the future from getting into a situation that we have to ask for the public money to do this type of work.
Are there any other questions or comments from RAC members? All right, seeing no hands, no one jumping on camera. Thank you, A and Ka and Malia, for joining to talk about some of the energy and lands and real estate in the state. And yep, we appreciate you being here. So thank you. Okay. That leads us to our final session of the day, which is just an opportunity for the RAC. Bring anything up that follow-up questions or anything from a previous discussion or comments or thoughts, and then we will move into a wrap-up and adjournment. So this is an opportunity for any RAC member to bring anything forward that you would like to share or follow up on. Okay, seeing nobody raise their hand or pop on camera for any sort of open discussion or follow-up, just a couple things before I turn it over to Doug to close us out for the afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining. I'd especially like to thank our different presenters, Lisa Strunk on the economic contributions, Alan Bittner for the virtual fencing, Doug talking about river map, Diane, Joel, John, and John talking about forest, health, and timber, and then Kemba, AG, and Malia talking about energy. It's really great to have you all, and also really great to have all of you RAC members that are on and have been participating. Hope that the information shared with you today is useful and it's information you can take forward to your individual RAC meetings tomorrow. I do know, reminder just for anyone who is staff or other RAC members, if you haven't yet, the Northwest and Southwest RAC will be jointly tomorrow, and the Rocky Mountain RAC will be meeting individually. Those meetings are all over as well, so if you have not registered for them, please do so. And then that, Doug, I am the meeting over to you to close us out.
Great. Thanks, Kirby. Thanks, everybody, for participating today. I know it's a lot of time out of your day, but I think we really got a good tour of all the pieces of the puzzle today at BLM Colorado. And I think as we started the conversation off, we really do all the things at BLM. And I think you all can help tell that story as RAC members, in your own issue areas and your own local areas and regions around the state. So again, appreciate all your engagement. And I think, beyond just kind of the normal things that we do, I think a lot of the things we talked about today were the innovative things that BLM Colorado is up to and working on, and how we're trying to be creative in a lot of these spaces as well. So thank you for your help on that. And hopefully you can carry that conversation into the RAC meetings tomorrow and provide even some more information back to us about how we can make progress in a number of these areas in the midst of, a transition that's giving us a lot of new information and direction to work with. So thanks again for all your support. And thanks again as well to you, Kirby, and all of our staff. This takes a lot of work to put on all the pieces of this puzzle. And again, gratitude to all of our staff who are implementing this work across the state.
Thanks all. Have a great day. Great seeing you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Kirby.
Thanks, Kirby. Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, we'll see some of you tomorrow.